Welcome to Microcap Explosions. This is Mariusz Skonieczny. This is video number 3 in the Voxtur video series. In this video, I will talk about the history of acquisitions, because what Voxtur is a roll-up strategy of different companies put together in order to solve or improve the appraisal, the assessment, title business. Speed up the closing process of real estate transactions. Now, if you understand how those pieces fit together, you are more likely to appreciate what's going on with this company and more likely to understand the thesis. Now, I've been watching this being put together practically all the way from the beginning. And Gary Yeoman, who's the chairman of the company, is pretty much in charge of the vision and in charge of putting this company together, while Jim Albertelli is the president or the CEO who's running the company. So I will talk about all of the pieces, which are, it starts with iLookabout, Clarosity, Apex, Voxtur, Anow, Zome, and Bennutech. I really, really strongly encourage you to study each one of them and understand how they fit together, because the entire thesis behind Voxtur is acquiring different companies for the technology, for the clients, for cross-selling opportunities, and for the ability to improve each individual products to again go back and sell better solutions to existing clients or the new clients that were just acquired. When I learned about Voxtur, it wasn't Voxtur. The company at that time was called iLookabout, and the whole journey started with Gary Yeoman, who, as I said before, is the chairman of Voxtur. He was kind of involved with iLookabout since 2013, 2014, or something like that. And then later, he became the CEO. So he came in, put in $2 million of his own money into it, rolled up his sleeves, cleaned up the house, and started building, as I would say, Voxtur masterpiece, because it's pretty interesting to watch what he's putting together. But the first piece of the equation is obviously iLookabout. iLookabout was a small company, mostly involved in the tax assessment business that I already explained in Canada and a little bit in the US. And they originally were an imaging company, like taking photos of the real estate and providing that imagery to governmental agencies. So remember this. This is going to be a very important piece for you to remember images. Remember that, images. So anyway, so after Gary became in charge of iLookabout, he orchestrated a merger or an acquisition, however you want to call it, of Clarosity. Clarosity was a company that was pioneering alternative methods of valuation. It has the best technology in creating alternative appraisals. So remember, not the full-blown appraisals, but alternative appraisal reports. And Clarosity was ahead of its day. It had the technology ahead of its competitors, but the market wasn't quite ready for it. And Clarosity ended up going bankrupt. It was a company that it was like an AMC, appraisal management company. AMCs were created after the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis to be an entity between the mortgage brokers and the appraisers. Before the financial crisis of 2008, brokers were the entities that were hiring appraisers, and after the crisis, AMCs were put in between so that the mortgage brokers, wouldn't impact the value of the property that the appraisers assigned. So Clarosity had this technology ahead of its time, and it was an AMC. So it was providing appraisal reports to the lenders. But now Clarosity was always, it didn't have enough business, was always starved out of cash. So as a result, it never got the trust of the clients, because the clients, the lender clients, didn't want to use it too much because they were always on the brink of bankruptcy, and then they had some debt. So what ended up happening was that the company was pushed, Clarosity was pushed into bankruptcy, and Gary, with iLookabout, bought Clarosity out of bankruptcy, or merged it, however you want to call it. Now, Gary wanted Clarosity for two reasons. One was the technology, but two, Clarosity had master service agreements with some of the top players like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were using Clarosity for valuing the default real estate. So that was a big, big deal, because those master service agreements are in itself a barriers of entry, and they could take 2 years. I even heard they could take up to 7 years to get. So if Voxtur wanted to, get an agreement with Fannie and Freddie from the scratch for that particular business, it would take a minimum of 2 years. So that was the main reason. Get Clarosity for the technology and for the master service agreements, because then you acquire those clients, and once you have relationships with those clients, you can sell those clients other products that you are in the process of developing. So by bringing those two companies together, the company also was able to improve its technology for the governmental agencies that were in the tax assessment business. Okay, so that was the first acquisition. Around that time is when I got involved. Then came an acquisition of Apex. Apex is a #1 sketching software for the appraisal industry. I used Apex all the time when I did appraisals, when I was the real estate appraiser. It's the #1 sketching software. And you need sketching when you measure the property, you need to sketch it out. And so what happened was that even up to this point, the appraisers were taking pen and paper and they were sketching it on site, and then they were taking this, that's what I did too, they were taking this to their office and redrawing it in Apex. Apex didn't have the iPad capabilities, so when Gary acquired Apex, they developed that so that the appraiser can go and take an iPad, draw it on site, and then this would automatically be taken into the software or into the database, and it eliminated the time of redrawing it and going back to the property if there was a mistake, rechecking something. So that alone made the appraisers more efficient. But what was instrumental about the Apex acquisition was, again, acquiring clients, acquiring technologies, improving the product. Apex was already being used by about 2,000 counties in the United States as a sketching software by the assessors. And the tax assessment business of iLookabout at that time was only in 20 counties. So by having Apex already in 2,000 counties presents an incredible cross-sell opportunities. Voxtur can go into those counties and say, you are already using the Apex software, but here we can make your process even better because we have this other solution. It's a completely different conversation when they are already using one of your products than if you cold call them and say, hey, we have something new. So this business alone of tax assessment business has tremendous opportunity for Voxtur. I believe that probably in 2022, maybe /23, that tax assessment business alone can generate about $100 million of revenues. And when the solution, tax assessment solution, is rolled out to many more counties in the US through those apex relationships, that business can be $1 billion a year in revenue business. So that I'm going to talk about this more in the blue sky potential. None of this is included in any of the evaluations that will come soon. After the Apex acquisition came the big one, because up to this point, it was all about appraisal, make the appraisers more efficient. But then Voxtur came in. Voxtur was a separate company. It wasn't iLookAbout. iLookAbout at the time was iLookAbout, Clarosity, and Apex under the name of iLookAbout. Voxtur was a company that was being run by Jim Albertelli, which is a lawyer, but he solves problems. He starts companies. He was behind the auction.com, very smart guy. He was behind Voxtur, and Voxtur had the title business and a foreclosure business. It was helping its clients to process foreclosures, bankruptcies, and things like that. So the idea behind putting iLookAbout and Voxtur together was, okay, we are solving problems in the appraisal space. We're going to be making the appraisers more efficient in order to have them do appraisals faster to improve the closing time. But title side is part of the closing. So if we're doing the appraisal side, why don't we also come together and do the title side? Because a lot of the information or technology or data that we have can be applied and sold to both. And again, iLookAbout had already a particular master agreements and client agreements, and then Voxtur has its own master agreements and relationship with clients. By putting those two companies together, the name of the company changed from iLookAbout to Voxtur. That's when Jim Albertelli came in and he became the president of the entire Voxtur company, while Gary Yeoman became the chairman of the company, being responsible for the whole vision of continually putting the company together. Now, on the title side is very interesting because, and I will talk more about this in the blue sky opportunity video, but for now, on the Voxtur side, I'm just going to ignore the title a little bit, and I want to talk about the foreclosure business, which is, again, helping clients process the foreclosures and bankruptcies and the delinquencies. That business alone, before the acquisition in 2019, that business generated $100 million of sales and about $20 million of EBITDA. Now, right after the acquisition, that business pretty much disappeared because there was a foreclosure moratorium and there was foreclosure and no foreclosures, no evictions allowed. Therefore, this business was pretty much dormant, doing nothing. Now, the foreclosure moratorium expired, and some might say there might be more foreclosures because of the pandemic or whatever. The bottom line is that the foreclosure moratorium expired, and that business will be returning. So if we go back to the pre-COVID levels, that business alone, the foreclosure business, not the title, the foreclosure business of Voxtur can be back to $100 million of revenues per year and $20 million of EBITDA or more, because obviously the company is growing and getting more and more clients through these acquisitions, and then the client base grows. So eventually I expect the foreclosure business to be a lot bigger than what it was pre-pandemic level, which again was $100 million, because the company has many more clients than it had before. I wouldn't be surprised to see that foreclosure business be $200-300 million business down the road. Then, after the Voxtur acquisition, came probably the most pivotal and one of the most important acquisitions, which was Anow. Anow was a company that was started by Marty Haldane, which was a real estate appraiser, but he was also a software developer, and he developed ANOW as a kind of like an operating system to help appraisal companies manage the workflow of appraisals better. So it includes ordering the appraisals, submitting the appraisals, not doing the actual appraisals, but the whole like operating system. So Gary had an eye on ANOW for a while, but he couldn't pull the trigger until the company was big enough in order to be able to afford such an acquisition. At first, when people saw ANOW acquisition, especially the investors, they weren't really sure if it was the solution for the problem, and that kind of was put to rest when recently UWM, United Wholesale Mortgage, signed up for ANOW. And why is this important? Because United Wholesale Mortgage is the #1 wholesale lender in the country. They are not like, when it comes to lending, you have two main players. You have retail lending and you have wholesale lending. On the retail side, you have the brand names like Bank of America, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and then on the wholesale side, you have like UWM, United Wholesale Mortgage. So the retail side has more of a competitive advantage because they have the brand name. And if you have a bank account with Bank of America, you trust them, and you might more likely go with a loan with someone like this. So then the players on the wholesale side, they have to become more competitive because they can't compete on rates, but they can compete on technology. So UWM it prides itself with technology, and as I said before, a mortgage is a commodity. The faster the closing, the more competitive advantage you have. So UWM signed up with ANOW, and it was a complete game changer. Barely anybody noticed, but for me, it's a complete game changer because it gave the stamp of approval from such a big player. And now we didn't see any press release from UWM because they wanted to keep it private. However, when you went to the press release of UWM and you signed up for what they released as an appraisal direct, meaning that they started ordering appraisals directly from the appraisers, you could see that link took you to ANOW, which confirmed some people's beliefs that ANOW was behind the appraisal direct for UWM. What is so massive about the ANOW and why it's the future of this company's appraisal division is that if it's like an operating system, then and appraisers are using the platform to be more effective. Appraisers pay a monthly fee for that platform. It's kind of like a network effect. If you have appraisers being efficient and using it, then more AMCs will want to use the platform. And when you have appraisers on the platform, the lenders will want to use the platform because the lenders will want to help appraisers be more efficient and faster. And the lenders are paying like a transaction fee, while the appraisers are paying a monthly fee for using the platform. Lenders are using transactional fees. So depending on which transaction they use, Voxtur is making anywhere between $20 to even $70 for transaction on the lender's side. And then that business is gaining traction from day to day. Because think about this. If a player like UWM is using the platform and they are able to cut the closing time and significantly improve their competitive advantage, they're going to take the market share from the competitors. And now, so the competitors are unlikely just going to be sitting there and letting UWM take their share. They're going to also take part in ANOW to close that gap between the competitive advantage that UWM has over them. And I bet many of these players are probably already testing the platform, if not using the platform. We don't know because many of them are quiet as to they want to keep it a secret from their competitors what platform they're using. So unfortunately for us, we're most likely going to have to wait for the revenues to show up in the financial statements. After ANOW, there was an acquisition called Xome. And Xome was part of Mr. Cooper. Mr. Cooper is a top 15 mortgage originator and top 4 mortgage servicer. So Mr. Cooper sold Xome Valuation division to Voxtur. And what's important about this is that this acquisition, again, through this acquisition, Mr. Cooper became a client of Voxtur, a big deal. And also, Mr. Cooper couldn't really utilize the zone valuation for its own portfolio because you have to have a separation of a lender and an appraisal company. So they were only able to use zone valuation services for third parties, but they are not in the business of valuing. They are in the business of originating and servicing. So by selling this platform, Zone, to Voxtur, now Voxtur can not only serve clients, third-party clients that Mr. Cooper had, they can also service Mr. Cooper as a client. And another very important piece of information from the Zone acquisition was the Zone came with a database, the best MLS database on the market. And as you saw when I was doing the appraisal report, you could see that MLS data is very much used in all the appraisal reports. So by having access to the best MLS data, this gives significant advantage to Voxtur in the appraisal space. And on the conference call, Jim Albertelli many times said that the Zone business portion alone will probably generate very close to $100 million of revenues in 2022. Finally, the most recent acquisition, which took over 100 days to close, finally closed, which is a Bennutech acquisition. So Voxtur acquired Bennutech. Now, this is huge and monumental for what's going to happen with Voxtur now, because as you were already seeing by learning about the appraisal space, learning about title, and then tax assessment business, everything is driven by data. And Voxtur is using the data and technology to solve problems and improve products for its clients. Bennutech is a company. So I want you to think, Bennutech and CoreLogic, those two companies are the only companies in the US that have access to property data of about 150 million properties. And I'm talking about tax information, assessment data, all sorts of data that is recorded at the governmental agencies. Those two companies are the only companies that have the data. CoreLogic was going to be the only one having monopoly on this data. But through anti-lawsuit legal action or legal agreement, that data had to be shared with another company. And that company was Bennutech. And now Bennutech had this data. And Bennutech's business, if you go to their website, was pretty much providing that data to real estate investors and real estate brokers in order to find properties or get listings. So in other words, people were able to sign up for Bennutech, pay like a monthly fee, and use that data to search for, show me the properties with divorces, or show me the properties that are close to this. They were using the data to narrow down the properties, and then they could market to those properties to either buy those properties as real estate investors or get those properties as listings. Now, when I saw this, my jaw dropped, because this huge gold mine of data was being used for such a small purpose. And by Voxtur acquiring Bennutech, what they are practically taking is that existing business, but most importantly, this data mine, gold mine, that they can take and now improve all of the products that they have through all the divisions and make themselves an incredible competitive advantage by owning this data, because this data means faster appraisals, faster tax assessment, better tax assessment. The access to this data will give Voxtur an incredible advantage, an incredible tool in order to be able to improve all of its products, improve efficiencies, make the appraisals be even faster. Because now, remember how I was showing you the appraisal form, how I was filling it out, how it was time consuming. and how A Now was a game changer, because A Now was a way to make appraisal firms better through that operating system. Now, the closing of a Bennutech is a complete game changer, because now the company can take the data, the property data, the zoning, the taxes, the assessment, the this of subject properties and comparable properties, and they can populate now. They can populate the appraisal report. So up to this point, the appraisers probably were using data from third-party providers. Now the appraisers will be able to be sold on all the injection into the form, which means that they will be able to complete the appraisals report much faster, because 90% of the report will be able to be populated with this data. They'll have the appraisal report 90% done before they inspect the property. And then so all they will need to do is be able to look at the comparable sales, make adjustments. And remember how I was telling you about the imagery. Used to be an image company. I bet now the images will be able to be inserted into the appraisal report, and the appraisers will need to go out and take pictures of the comparables or the subject property. I'm not 100% sure on that. But also another thing is that the problem with real estate data is that you don't know if it's true or correct. By having the imagery, satellite imagery for the former iLookabout, by having the sketching software, which is already in all the counties, Voxtur will be able to verify this data very quickly if it's true or not by overlaying the picture from the imaging company iLookabout and then the sketching from Apex, and then a lot of the errors will be omitted through this. This is a huge, huge competitive advantage, because no competitor has the ability to overlay the images and then the sketching to verify that the property's information is correct. Huge competitive advantage. The same thing will happen with title. I already told you that in order to research the title, you have to search all these public documents. And now with the Bennutech acquisition, this gives them access to all of this data that is purely used for the research of title, or a significant portion of the title. Finally, the big deal behind the Bennutech acquisition is that it will create a brand new business opportunity. You see, they also recently acquired Real Wealth Technologies. So what they're doing is they are going to create a product for the consumer. So far, all the products that they have is for governmental agencies or businesses. With this data, they will create real wealth product, and what it will have is people will be able to go to a website. So if you have a house, you'll be able to enter the address, and it will spit out a valuation or a tax assessment for you, and it will show you for a payment how your taxes or how your assessment compares to your neighbors. This is another incredible opportunity, because if you live somewhere and you want to fight your taxes, you don't know how your taxes compare to your neighbors if there was a mistake made. But with this website or with this new product line, you'll be able to type in your address, and for a small payment of $25, you will be able to find out whether your taxes are, what they should be, how they compare to your neighbors. And if you want to fight it, you can pay another $25, and you can just have a report, or Jim Albertelli's law firm can simply fight the taxes for you and make it a smoothless process. Anyway, so this is it for this video. I think it's very important for you to understand how the pieces come together, how the Voxtur masterpiece is being put together, and what each acquisition brings to the table. With the Bennutech acquisition, I think we are off to the races right now. There is enough pieces in place now to just make Voxtur an incredible company and an incredible competitor with a huge moat around it. That's it for this video. In the next video, I will talk about the valuation, projections of revenue, how I arrived at certain $5, $10 per share or even $40 per share. I will show you comparable companies, and you will decide on your own if you think Voxtur is undervalued at the current levels or not. Thanks for watching.